morning or good afternoon. This is the February 14th, 2012 meeting of East Multnomah County League of Women Voters. And happy Valentine's Day to everyone, and happy birthday to the state of Oregon. Anyway, today we're going to try something different, and it's going to be like a roundtable discussion. And you can imagine that you are George Will, or Cokie Roberts, or Gwen Eiffel, or the political reporter from the New York Times. And the one nice thing about discussions, and I guess I'm George Stephanopoulos, huh? Anyway, the one good thing about discussions is it is perfectly legal to state opinions or suppositions. These are thoughts from you, and our thoughts are going to go all different places today. And so the first thing I did was to hand out copies, those of you who didn't copies, and I want to read the very first part of the introduction. It says, federal, state, and local governments own extensive assets and are major employers. Governments often consider selling assets and outsourcing some functions and services to the private sector, including core government services such as providing for the safety, security, and general welfare, public well-being of citizens, the economy, and our country. Privatization of these government assets, or privatizing a government service or function in particular, may enhance the function or service, or it may reduce or alter the function and services. Government revenues may be reduced or lost, and jobs may be cut. In some instances, this may have a detrimental effect on the common good or public well-being. One state, for instance, has declared as a matter of state law and policy that using private contractors to provide public services formerly provided by state employees does not always promote the public interest. To ensure that citizens receive high-quality public services at low cost with due regard for taxpayers and the needs of public and private workers, the legislature finds it necessary to regulate such privatization contracts through the state. So, come on in, Lorraine. Come on in, Shirley. So do we all pretty clear know what privatization means, or what we're going to be talking about? Okay, I'm going to throw out some ideas, and remember that privatization of government services can occur at the federal level, at the state level, at the county level, public schools, city level. So it covers a broad spectrum of all government services, right? Okay, so I'm going to start with some examples, or we're going to consider some examples and discuss them, and there will be other examples that you will think of that you will tell me, because I don't know anything or anything at all about a lot of things, and a lot of you know more than I do. So the first thing that came to mind was the U.S. Postal Service. And I want to say in 1970, Nixon signed the Postal Reorganization Act to change it to a U.S. Postal Service as an independent agency within the executive branch. So do you consider that privatization?
Yes. No, I don't.
I do.
The purpose for doing this was that it would take the Postal Service out of the political realm, so that they wouldn't be hiring postmasters for political reasons rather than for good reasons, and it's supposed to make it more efficient. And to this end, they instituted the zip code system, which I guess has worked pretty well, would you say? But what has happened to the Postal Service?
They're losing to competition.
Well, and the internet, of course, and the getting away from a lot of the paper. I think technology has had a lot to do with the problems with the postal service.
I do a lot of mailing, and the other day I ran across a 3-cent stamp that kind of brought back fond memories, and I understand they're going to 45 pretty quick now, but it's just gotten more and more expensive all the time.
Oh, well, the days of the 1-cent postage stamp are long gone. Do you think that emails on the internet should be taxed?
No.
So you're
Because
talking about,
this is where the postal service is losing a lot of money, is because people are sending emails, right?
so are we talking about totally privatizing the postal service? Is
I
that what
don't
we're
know,
talking
it should
about
be,
here?
I have no idea. I'm just throwing out some ideas for you to play with.
Well, I think that UPS and FedEx delivers a lot of things, you know, for businesses, even envelope type things. But they don't go to rural areas. Even now, my sister worked and retired from the post office, and even now in the rural areas, the FedEx and UPS uses the postal service for some delivery of some of their packages, because postal service has to go to everywhere. You know, they're mandated to go to everywhere and serve all, even though they're gonna close down some of the rural area post offices, they'll still be serving those people. And so if you privatize, will all those people be served? Because they're not profitable kind of areas to go after. So I think this is what we need to look at when we're talking about this privatization. Will private entities really serve all that need to be served?
For the common good.
Right.
Currently, FedEx contracts with the government for delivery of some of the mail, like from Portland to Alaska, or you know, from major city to major city, thereby eliminating the need for planes by the Postal Service or bigger trucks. Anyway, I was quite surprised to find out some time ago that that the Postal Service did contract with FedEx for that particular service. Now, whether or not it's economical, I would assume that it is, or they wouldn't be doing it. But it is apparently occurring to a certain extent in some areas of the Postal Service.
I sent a birthday card to my grandson who lives in Beaverton. It took 3 days for the birthday card to get there. If you send an email, the message gets there the same day, right?
If everything's working.
She's having computer problems right now, don't talk to her about it.
Lorraine?
Well, as far as the service is concerned, a lot of my things that come regarding organizations is always late. I always get it later than everybody else. And I was told it's because of the post office that it can hold anything that they want for up to a week. And of course my postman, my mail carrier swears up and down that isn't so, but it's always late arriving. But as far as privatization, I just have never seen that is a private entity, because the government still makes the decisions and does funding. So
But the operation is privatized.
But when I look at privatization, and when I look at anything, I think, okay, I'm going to follow the money first. And the post office has to go to Congress to get money to operate. So is it, I don't consider it being completely privatized. It may be partially privatized, but it isn't completely
Well, it's
privatized as
funded.
far as I'm concerned.
It's funded
So
by the government.
why are we saying, I'm going
But
to
it's funded
privatize
by
the, I'm going to privatize this sector, yet, we complain that, postal workers are they are considered federal workers,
Yes. There
all right? They have that pension of federal workers. I'm thinking, if you took away my pension from my brother, I'm sure he would scream. Because that's a good pension. So are all our benefits, because they are federal workers. So how can you be a federal worker and have it privatized? I don't understand that. Is the person who you are privatized with, are they not paying their wages? Are they not paying your health benefits? Are they not paying your pension? I
When
don't
you-
understand
when
all
you
of that.
When you read this about them being privatized, could you just kind of go over that again? How are they privatized?
Oh, it said the Postal Service was an independent agency within the executive branch.
And what does that mean, independent agency?
So I don't think, it may not be true
I
privatization.
don't think it is.
Um,
Because they're still under the
Considering the
rule.
fact that they're still billions of dollars in debt and they want to be bailed out, or they need to close services in order to get things running again. Now, at the brunch, a member of the Portland League, I think, asked Betty Roberts a question about privatization, and the group that came immediately to her mind was, oh, OPB. You remember when she said that?
Yes.
Okay, remember OPB, Oregon Public Broadcasting, at one time was funded almost totally by the state education system and so forth. And over the years, they were receiving less and less money. And every year, or 2 or 3 times a year, we have these pledge drives, and they beg us for money, and which I send because I watch an awful lot of Channel 10. And so, have they been completely privatized, or are they still part of the state, or?
I think they still get, that the National Public Broadcasting System still gets money from Congress, but they have to go to Congress, I believe, for it. But they're, the last several years, there's talk every year about eliminating funding, at least at the national level, from the federal government for national public broadcasting. And that is the source of many of the programs also for our local public broadcasting system. So, it is not run by the federal government, but the federal government contributes some of the funding.
It's my understanding that each public broadcasting station, though, has sort of autonomy. They can present whatever programs they or their members want.
Yes.
They don't all have to
Right.
show the same programs.
Well, they have to buy the program, they buy it.
Right.
Mhm.
You know. I know some people that would like to get rid of it completely.
Yeah, there are some. Well, no, go ahead.
I'm going to change the subject. All right. I'd like to talk about privatization of prisons.
Okay,
Okay.
I think we would all be surprised if we knew how many privatized prisons or privately owned prisons are around the United States, and how many people are incarcerated in them.
I'm not aware.
A lot
Not
of
at all.
the federal
No.
ones,
Yeah.
a lot of the federal, what do you call, where they're not the real bad criminals. What do they call that? I forgot the word. for it.
lifers?
No, the ones that are white collar people and.
Minimum security.
Minimum
Yeah.
security. A good portion of the federal minimum security are private. I know that. And companies, you know, run lots of them, and they're
Mhm.
contracted to do that.
And how do you feel about that? Do you feel that they're serving the common good the best way? How are they overseen? Are there inspectors who compare their treatment to treatment in other places, or check up on things like that?
One of the things that would concern me about privatization of, many of the services would be the oversight. Would it be state oversight? Would it be federal oversight? Would there be no oversight? It would seem to me that the oversight aspect of it would be extremely important, especially in assigning maybe contracts or assigning companies to run or to be in charge of certain things. How good would the oversight be to make sure that there weren't abuses in the operational system itself, regardless of what the service might be? And does this open things up for cronyism? Does it open things up for favoritism? How would the assignments be made? How would the decisions be made as to who would run those services?
I have a friend that has been an estimator for a construction company for years and years and years, and her expertise is in getting federal contracts. And one of the things that not just federal, but government contracts.
Okay.
And I discussed this with her last week at lunch, this very thing about oversight, and she said all the experience that she's had, the federal is run so much better than the state and the city or county governments. She said the cronyism in the state and the city and the county governments is so much more. The federal oversight is so much better in these things than any of those. They tend toward that cronyism in the smaller ones, is what she told me. So just in her
Okay.
little particular case, that's what she's observed.
One of the things that also happens in the state and when the state or local area builds a prison is that they're not looking at themselves as public service. They're looking for profit. They ask small towns who are on the edge of bankruptcy, wouldn't you like to have a nice prison here, and there'd be maybe 40 or 50 or 100 jobs that would be well paying and so on. And it seems to me that sets up a system immediately that is suspect, because there doesn't seem to be careful state oversight or city oversight when the system is really looking at bringing in money to either state, county, or city.
Isn't there an instance, in fact, in Eastern Oregon, where
Yes.
they're talking about cutting jobs or cutting some of the prison beds or whatever, and the small town where it is wants to keep the prison because it creates jobs? And this is true, I think, of a lot of our small towns.
But I don't know that those are really contracted or privately owned prisons. Those may be state prisons, that are run by the state. So, but I do know that years and years ago, I had a young man that I visited in El Paso, and it was a federal crime that he committed, and it was one of those minimum security, and it was It was a country club. It was run so beautifully, and so, I mean, it had all the rules, you know, that of me visiting. I mean, it was very strict and very boom boom, and but his opportunities were wonderful. I mean, you know, he worked outside of the prison. They had all kinds of sport activities and all kinds of things available to them through that prison. I mean, and it was immaculate, and it was really well run. He had good food. So it was really well run from my point of view as a visitor there, you know.
Who was running it?
I don't know the company, but I know that it, you know, all the employees that I came, you know, and checked in and everything, they were all, you know, employees of a company, not of the federal government. So, and the company even built the facility, so it wasn't even the federal government that built the facility. So it looked from the outside that it was run very well, you know what I mean? And certainly for rehabilitation, it was great, you know, as far as rehabbing anybody that was in there, to get them to be a productive member of society. It seemed to me that it was run wonderful. So,
And on the other hand, I saw a picture just yesterday, I think it was, of a prison that was privatized, and there were bunks on this side of the building. A huge number of inmates were there, and there were some places to wash up in the middle, and in the foreground, one guy was just beating the tar out. He had him down, and clearly was really hurting him. And in this picture, there was not a guard inside. I don't know.
was that a private facility?
That was a private facility.
Well, do you have
Where
any
is
idea
that?
how many private facilities there are, or where they are? Or,
No, I've
There
never
are a lot of
researched
or how many
that.
states
Yes.
have them? Or
But I did know that when I talked to the guards that this was kind of a common thing for these minimum security prisons throughout the country on a federal level. I do know that. That's what
be
they told me.
interesting to know more about that.
Yeah.
Now, if a prison is privatized, where do they get their money?
It's for
It's
profit.
contracted through the
It's
government.
for-
It's like a
for
government
profit.
contract.
Oh,
The
okay.
And they-
government's
And
supposed
so
to
as far as
oversee.
oversight, we were talking about oversight, and she was saying about oversight, and I thought, well, either the federal government is oversight in the particular one I visited,
Right.
or they just are a well-run company. From my perspective, they may have been gouging or whatever, but I have no idea, because it was just as a visitor that I was there, so.
Oversight is the key, I think, to it, and it's for profit, and I'm sure the government has a oversight committee or something that's set up to look at that, so I think probably they're run as well as the oversight committee stays on top of it. But you probably read about the prison out in the eastern part also, that there was an employee who had been mishandling funds for the food services, and he's now residing in one of the prisons, I don't know which one.
Hopefully not that.
But he was caught doing it, so I don't know whether it was a government run or not. That can happen wherever.
Well, it seems like any time there's federal funding or anything, there has to be some type of oversight
Yes.
of those funds and what's happening.
And whether they are making, whether they're charging more than what was costing before, or whether it's not an improvement, or whether it is, all those things should be analyzed somewhere.
But when you look at the state of our correction system right now, we're getting so many prisoners, and still we have a jail sitting down here in Portland that isn't even being used. So it,
And hasn't been used for many
No, it
years.
hasn't
It's
been
never
used at all.
been used, basically.
and why that hasn't been used for some of the prisoners,
Or even
There's no
mental,
overload of
funding.
prisoners.
There's
or
no-
even mental patients who need to be kept.
We voted for the prison, and then we voted down the operating levy. So we have a prison, and there's no funding to run it.
But,
And
but they've also turned down what the federal government wanted to,
Yes.
send prisoners in, and that would help fund it, you'd think, but that's been turned down. So,
It may have to do with economics. Maybe they weren't willing to pay enough to make it economical for the county government to do that. And it is a county
Yeah.
facility, not a state facility. It is a
but we
county.
never hear the answers to those questions.
So,
Now, think about how we get from one place to another, either on an interstate highway, if you're going to Minnesota or someplace, or on a state highway, or on a county road, or on a city street. All of these things cost money. I was driving out Division this morning, and there's a area for several blocks with one pothole after another on Division Street. Somebody has to pay to fix those potholes to keep the roads drivable, and so that we have a communication and emergency preparedness and common good. Is there any part of that should be privatized, or should it never be privatized? Sharon?
Bringing up the question of toll roads in the area, or, they're suggesting that there should be a toll to pay for the Columbia Crossing Bridge. Or a few years ago, they were questioning toll roads in Dayton, Silverton area.
in the
Somewhere.
Dayton area, yes.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
And I'm assuming that the tolls would be collected, well, I don't know, privately or not. I think that the Dayton project was a private company would build the new improved roads out there, and they would collect tolls from the users of that new highway. And it seems, on the surface, it sounds very practical, but I don't know why it was not permitted to proceed. I don't know if the locals.
Oh, it was voted down.
Voted in.
Okay.
Yeah, the local people
Mhm.
voted it down.
Because I didn't, obviously, I probably wouldn't want to pay, as a local, I probably wouldn't want to pay to use a road either.
But years ago, that's how the present interstate bridge was funded. That was a toll bridge for years until it was paid off. And I had never had any experience with toll roads or anything until when we were in New England and then along the eastern seaboard. And there are a fair number of tolls there, and if toll roads. If you want to go on the major highway, I mean, you pay, and you'll pay for one section, and then pay for another section, and but that's how some of that funding
And
is
then,
done. I think
when the
that
section is paid for, does this toll stop?
If it's governmentally run, yes. If it's privately run, I don't see that it ever would stop. If they would be, I don't know whether they'd be maintaining it even. Maybe it would have to do with a contract with whatever county or state or federal agency. If it's across state lines, it would have to be federal, I would think, or cooperative. San Francisco Bay Bridge was a toll bridge
Still
for
is.
many years. It was the
Still
most
is.
Is it?
expensive
Yeah,
bridge
is
in
it?
history, I
Just
think.
came across it
And it
a
finally
week
is
ago.
paid for, so those funds went into a municipality type of thing, I think, until it was paid. But with a privatization, I don't know. And in case of emergencies, whoever owns the bridges and the roads and so forth, I just would feel more comfortable if a governmental agency was responsible personally, but anyway.
There are differences in the qualities of roads.
Yes.
I remember as a child, we would across from Multnomah County into Washington County, and the pavement on the road was totally different. You could tell immediately
Yes.
once you crossed the line.
Even Multnomah to Clackamas.
To Clackamas, yeah.
You know.
Yep.
I don't think that's so true today as it was during the Depression years. But anyway, that you could really tell the difference. So
You can still tell a difference.
I think we all agree that roads and streets exist for the common good, and we need them. We have to have them for all kinds of reasons, I think.
And we have to pay for them.
Mhm.
That's the key. Are we
It
willing to
is.
pay for
Yeah.
them?
But
Yes, are we
we
willing?
have to pay for the use of the services that we have.
And that's another instance where, when it comes to a vote to increase the gas tax, even 1 penny, it
Goes down.
It goes down, it goes down, and yet we want good roads, but it
And
seemingly,
bridges.
and bridges, roads and bridges, but we aren't willing to make whatever sacrifice might be required to do that. But if you think, a penny a gallon on gasoline, what a full tank of gas would be not many pennies. But at
think the
any
problem
rate,
with-
but it seems to be a mind, or getting to be a mindset anymore, that if you breathe the word tax increase, it's an automatic no, regardless of the necessity and
Well, I think that if
Need.
more people could understand that it's a 1 penny tax that's for a specific thing, and when that specific thing is done, it ends, like you were saying, it ends. If we could know that, I think that there'd be a lot more people that
But
would
how
vote
can
for
you
it.
say maintenance will end? This
No,
penny
I'm not
is.
talking about maintenance.
Oh,
I'm
you
not
mean like
talking
a toll road
Yeah,
or something like that?
we're gonna pay
Oh,
for this
yes.
bridge,
Yeah.
we're gonna pay for, and
Uh-huh.
I think that's where, people have gotten to where they don't trust that it will end, that this is, just like your household, you're gonna set aside this much to take a vacation this year, and it's like, well, if you start using it for all kinds of other things, you're not gonna have it for that, and so then you have to find a way to make more money to be able to do what you were gonna do in the beginning for the maintenance or whatever, but, I just really think that's why a lot of people have gotten so against taxation. I personally am not like that, but I really think that's where their reasoning is at, because they've been burnt too many times. Laws have been put in, taxes have been made for specifics, and then they become general fund items, and it never goes away.
I don't see how privatization would work for roads,
No, I don't either.
because there's a need all over, and somebody has to make those decisions as to what area is going to be done when, and it just.
Now, going down to a more local level, it used to be every little school district had their own school buses. Gresham, before it became Gresham Borough, and they would send out school buses and pick up children to go to school, whatever. Nowadays, almost no school district has their own school buses. Most of them now contract with school bus services. It used to be you'd see school buses coming along and they would say Laidlaw on the side, and now you see school buses coming along and it says first student, is that correct? Okay, the school district does not have to worry about if a bus breaks down and getting a mechanic to fix it and so forth. The other company has to worry about all these things. But again, your primary concern, besides economy, of course, is safety of the students, right? And again, how do you oversee that is done? Do you compare statistics year after year to see how many children die or how many children fell out of the bus or whatever year after year? How do you decide that this is a good company and should be kept or not?
Well, this is all done through bids through school districts.
Federal money pays for the buses here.
But the local school districts have oversight of the services, and they're on top of it all through. I worked with that. I know they're working directly with them daily. So,
But I was surprised to learn that the federal government, I thought it was wonderful that the buses went to every place here and children were always bused to school. And they said, well, that's a federal government.
it doesn't cover all the cost, not at all. It covers a certain percent.
But they said without that, they couldn't do it. It's very important. So when they start cutting federal funds to schools, that goes along with it. So,
But the school districts have control of that, and
And then the
they
government
are the
has-
oversight.
yeah, and the federal government then oversees their money too, so, that they give.
Can you think of
So they
other
don't.
ways that a school district farms out services?
Well, the
Oh,
person
many
that came and
ways.
talked to us, isn't that ESD thing, the
Food
service, I mean,
services.
all that's all private company, isn't it? That they
Oh,
contract with
no,
them?
no,
Is that not how that works?
no. That's tax fund, and you pay, part of your property taxes go to the local education fund system.
But,
But I mean,
but the
those
school
people
districts
are not-
contract for
are
food
not,
service.
Yes.
Employees of the school district is what I understood.
They're
They
public
contract.
service, you bet. There's school district.
Contracts with the educational service district.
Right.
And, but it is, the
I mean, that guy
education
that came to
service
talk to us
district.
earlier last year, the ESD guy that came and talked to us, I was understanding that he was not an employee of the school district.
Well,
Not
it's not a
a
district.
school district,
Well, but
but,
I mean, he's
the
not an employee
educational-
of the state.
no, he's an employee of the educational service district, which is a separate entity. And there are only,
And it's not
oh,
a-
Lorraine,
it's
help
not-
me, 4 or 5 educational
Right.
service
there's
districts
about
left now.
But I mean, his paycheck comes through the state, is that what you're
No,
saying?
it comes through the Multnomah County Educational Service District. It's a separate district.
But I mean,
It's
what I
county.
mean
It's
is,
county.
it's a county
No.
funded thing?
No,
Well,
we pay
Yeah.
taxes to the education service district,
Okay.
just
But
as
if-
we pay taxes for the school district. It's a separate entity that collects taxes and makes contracts and provides services.
Okay.
That
I
the
just
school
didn't think he
districts.
was an employee, a public employee.
Oh, yes.
I
He's
thought,
a
I
public
thought that
employee.
Yes.
he was
All-
a company employee.
No, all of the state, county
Okay.
are under the education.
Oh, okay, I misunderstood.
I think we all agree that our armed forces, our Army and Navy and Air Force and so forth, Marines, have to be public and have to be, provide services for the common good. Now, I was talking to Marlene and I said, I could be wrong, I said, I thought that somewhere in our war with Iraq that we used mercenaries,
yes.
and way back in the Revolutionary War, we used mercenaries, etc. Is that a good idea or a bad idea?
They still do.
Yeah,
Yes,
they're still,
They're contracted.
unfortunately.
There's a lot of contracted people out there.
And that reduces morale of our soldiers too, because they're making a minimum wage, so to speak, and the contracted people from these big companies are making a lot more money, and they have better equipment and so forth sometimes.
But so many of our military are leaving the military and going into the contracted services, and they're all over the world doing that.
I think it needs to be rethought.
Well, and again, that gets back to oversight, that's what this big
Uh-huh.
lawsuit with KBR is all about, is they
But
have-
I, for one, didn't even know they were doing it until years after it had been in effect. It was always
uh-huh.
sub rosa, so to speak. It was strange.
And I really wonder if there's been a clear attempt to understand if there's a conflict of interest.
Well, yes.
It sounds to me as if the whole system could be riddled with conflict of interest.
It's a profit-making organization that handles most of it.
And a very dangerous job.
It is, so they're not in business if we don't have wars. You know?
I think that's what Mr. Eisenhower was implying.
Yes.
He did, and they should have listened, but they didn't want to hear it, so. Beware of the industrial complex.
Okay,
I-
every day
Oh.
we eat our lunch or our dinner or our breakfast or whatever, and we receive mail that we don't want, junk mail, so we throw it out. Someone has to collect all this stuff we don't want and get it out of our way quickly and safely. And so we come up with garbage service. Now, the city or the state or whatever, the city's individual areas, is that a franchise? Is that different than a
Yes.
contract?
Yeah. Well,
And who awards a franchise? The city does, is that correct?
The city
cities.
does.
Okay, because this is certainly a service that has to be done, and we want it done economically and well, and without any public hazard, right? You don't want them to dump someplace where the flies create all kinds of diseases or whatever. So, how does a franchise work, and how do you not politicize a franchise? How do you know they are not giving the franchise to the son of their favorite boss or something like that?
Oh, I think it's a public bidding process, and it would be advertised in the paper, and any company that was interested in bidding could do so. And then the local government would determine which seemed to be the most efficient or the best suited. But as far as garbage services and things like that, those are awarded by bidding. I mean, they're sealed bids, of course, but the process is open to any number of qualified companies that might want to do that. And then I think within Gresham there are certain areas that are, and correct me if I'm wrong on this because I certainly could be, but certain companies have certain areas within the
Yes.
city itself. It's not all one company that serves the entire Gresham area, for instance.
I think more bizarre things happen with garbage disposal than anything else. My brother-in-law is in Tulsa, and down there they buy the lot, or they buy their franchise. They have the Tulsa all split up into sections, and you own this one, and somebody owns this one. Just bizarre.
Now, is waste management a government agency
No,
or a
it's a
private
private
agency?
Private company.
Private company.
It's a large private company.
Okay.
And there are others that you see their trucks around town.
Because it's handled, it does things separate from your garbage service.
Evidently, it works with the other
Yeah.
repositories, for want of a better word.
Well,
where
you
they
pay your
take
bill
it.
through Gresham City, so.
Yes,
you know.
and so it's a
No,
contract.
no.
Yes, it's a contracted
Yeah.
thing.
You paid the
You
company.
pay to the service provider.
Yes.
I don't get a bill, I guess maybe the.
No, we pay our
Oh,
bills to the
but-
city.
No, no.
Yeah.
Oh,
I
but
would
it
think
may
regional
be,
sanitary
it may be
service.
included with your monthly,
Yeah.
We pay it to them, but we send it to
Yeah.
the city, the city
No,
employee.
no, we send it right to Hoodview.
because
Hoodview
Kit
is-
lives in a,
Oh, I was thinking
Oh,
about
okay.
water, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Water.
Yeah, the same is true, of course, of water.
Yeah.
You want water that you can drink, that you don't get
Yes.
sick.
Mhm.
And so that is a bill that you pay, but that's government total,
And
isn't
that's
it?
state mandated, I think.
Yeah.
Well,
Mhm.
that goes,
Now, when we were discussing county services, someone had told me that the Multnomah County farms out their mental health services, and somebody here in this group mentioned 2 or 3 other things that the county does, and I don't remember who said what. Does anybody know anything about county services?
There
Uh,
are many of them.
I think they do with
They
the mental health.
Yeah,
There-
Cascadia and Morrison and the various ones.
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
They contract out to, I think evaluations and treatment centers, various
And
treatment.
alcohol treatment things are jobbed out, I think. And many things like that, those services, psychiatric, as you said.
I watched a program a couple weeks ago on Frontline, OPB, and it talked about how so many of the counties throughout the United States are contracting out for their coroner services. And it went through all the problems with that. And basically it came down, once again, to the oversight part of it. And the cronyism at
Yes.
the more local levels, and the problems with that the oversight is not good, and that kind of thing. And so it goes back to what I was saying about the lady that I know that does federal and whatever work, and it's like, as it gets down to these lower levels, you know, you and I and as citizens are not really watching it and not really and making sure that oversight is not there, you know, as much. And we're taking it for granted that our governments are doing their job properly. And so it's, what I want to say about this whole privatization issue that has been brought up is that I think it's way too general and way too big. These discussions we're having, you know, I think that this was wrong for them to lump this subject into, it's just too huge a subject. They need to get more specific with this subject.
I agree with you.
You know, I think it's just, you know, it's just not a good thing for them to study this way.
This is why we're having a 2-month study because of that, which will help us more when we get to the consensus questions about oversight and about transparency and the other things that are mentioned in the questions, we will have formed a better idea of what they mean and what we want to watch out for. I think we've done a marvelous discussion this morning, and I think we brought up several interesting topics. Is there anything else you want to say about the subject?
Well, I'll say this much, is probably at the local level, there is that cronyism, and we tend to let things get a little bit worse when there are people that we know, before we'll take a hard stand. With the federal government, we're not quite as connected with it. And so they do something wrong, and hey, we're right on there. But it isn't that way with the state and the counties and cities. So the further away you do get.
My thought is too that we are a democracy.
Yeah.
And we empower our representatives to handle our common needs. And they seem to be jobbing them out, and if they do, they should have better oversight. And I think many things need to still be under the direct control of us, indirectly through our representatives, of course. But we lose sight of what's going on sometimes, and we assume things are being done as minimally expensive as they could be. But many times there's profiteering, and there's cronyism, and there is lack of oversight for whatever reason, so.
Well, when we talk about the oversight, that covers such a big area too.
Yes.
You look at some of the projects, whether it's city or county or state, the tram was one thing with Portland that nobody knew how much it was costing. Well, why wasn't there an oversight on
Yeah.
that? The Columbia Crossing, they've spent billions of dollars
Yes,
already on
yes.
planning, and
Yes.
nobody's really
I
been
know.
keeping track of what's happening,
Yes.
and the oversight has been
Yes.
missing there again. And it's one thing
Yes.
after the other.
And
The computer systems.
I do watch
It's-
the hearings on public broadcasts, and it's wonderful to watch these heads of departments report to Congress, and Congress is on top of a lot of it. And I'm very impressed with many of our congressmen. And then it filters down to the local implementation sometimes, and I wonder who is in charge, so that's all.
And
That's
how
what
do
most-
we know whether something is being run well?
Yes,
Or
You don't.
not? What questions do we need to ask? And how responsible should we be as citizens to ask the questions and expect some answers?
and we need to be better informed ourselves. We need to really
I guess
to
that's
be
what
more
I'm
alert
saying
to
is.
what's going on,
This
Yeah, it's-
discussion leads us right into charter schools. And speaking of no oversight.
No,
And
and that's,
unqualified people running,
yes,
I don't know how it is here, but up in Seattle, it was a mess.
With what, John?
charter schools.
Oh,
Suddenly you hear that
It
one's
siphoned a
collapsed.
whole lot of money out of the public schools. And my experience with them was that they really were unqualified to teach.
I guess we would say government agencies go to privatize something because they think they will save some money by contracting or whatever. Usually, maybe you do away with $100 toilet seats or something by contracting out various things. But the disadvantage, of course, is that you lose part of your control, and there are other disadvantages as to whether they're really doing something for the common good. So I thank you all for coming, and we'll talk about this more next month, and we will have speakers next month. And so if you come up with more questions, and we're going to think more seriously about the consensus questions as we listen to our speakers. Okay? Thank you.
thank you,
Sunny.
Thank you.
Thank you.